Buonasera, welcome back to our Italian sessions. Today we have another brief video to understand how to translate the word time from English into Italian. There are different ways to do it. We have different words according to context. I'm sure you know by now that context is crucial. Context is always very, very important for choosing the correct words or the correct construction as well sometimes. So let's go immediately and see our page with some examples that hopefully will make things a little bit clearer if you do have problem with these words in particular. So in general, we can say that the word time can be translated in Italian with the word tempo. However, let's see what kind of context we can use the word tempo in. First of all, tempo in Italian also means weather. If you're talking about the weather forecast, for example, or we're talking about the weather, and not all English speakers like talking about the weather, but in general, the British do like and do talk about the weather a lot. So they're always, in fact, quite curious. How do I talk about the weather? Although in Italy, people don't really talk about the weather. I don't know, once in a while, once in special occasions. Although I will do a video just for the weather. However, if we're talking about the weather, wherever you are in the world, the word for it in Italian is tempo. So if you're asking how is the weather, che tempo fa? Che tempo fa? Or com'è il tempo? What's the weather like? Luckily, no, luckily, literally, um, how is the weather? Com'è il tempo? So a couple of examples using the word tempo with the meaning of weather. Oggi fa bel tempo. Today the weather is nice, literally beautiful. Or oggi fa brutto tempo. Today the weather is bad, or there is bad weather, literally ugly weather. So that is done. Now let's see about other ways to use the word tempo. As I said, we will come back to the actual weather and how to describe it, etc. We're not doing it today. So let's see other translations for the word time. We can use the word tempo. However, let's see which context. If we're talking about the amount of free time that you have, or not necessarily the busy time that you have, then you do use the word tempo. Let's see some examples. Oggi non ho tempo. Today I have no time, or I don't have any time. Or che cosa fai nel tempo libero? What do you do in your free time or spare time? So this is when you use the word tempo, talking about the amount of hours, of minutes, months as well that you have at your disposal. Um, Instead, we can also translate time with the word ora instead. But in a specific context, when we are talking about exactly what time it is on the clock. So if you're asking about the time, che ore sono? What is the time? What's the time? Also some expressions like è ora di andare. It's time to go. It's time to leave. It's time to do whatever. You use the word ora. You can use tempo as well. However, because it's a little bit more subtle, the use of tempo in this type of expressions, it's better to stick with ora. È ora di fare, è ora di lavorare, è ora di andare. So use ora. And then we have this expression era ora, which is finally, it was about time. It was about time. Era ora. Exactly as it is, don't change it. It was about time. Like in English, you can't really change anything. Era ora. Ah, finally. And then time with the meaning of, or translated into volta, which is probably the example that you use the most. So volta, when you're counting how many times or how many repetition of a certain action you have done. For example, ci sono stata 2 volte. I have been there twice or 2 times. So when you're counting, uh, like once or once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, etc. You use volte, not tempo. And also, I'm sure you know some of these expressions, qualche volta, expressions of time, qualche volta, sometimes. Tutte le volte. Tutte le volte is every time. And you can use this also as, oh, every time I go there, something is wrong. I don't know. Tutte le volte che vado lì. And then la prima volta, the first time, very first time, or l'ultima volta, the last time you have done something. So I think probably the new thing or the use the less common, less familiar is use translated time with ora, not just when you ask the time, but also using it with certain expressions in conversation, like è ora di andare. Especially this one, I think, is the one that could maybe, as I said, it's a little bit more new or less familiar than the others. And instead, the use of volta is the one that gets maybe well, sometimes it's wrong. It's used in a wrong way. Some people use the word tempo instead of volta. So when you're counting, I said how many times you've done something, you can only use volta, not tempo. And finally, a couple of uses of the word tempo in Italian. For example, bei tempi, the good old days, literally beautiful times, good old days. And then something, especially when you're learning the language, when you're talking about the grammar, or not necessarily, but when you're talking about which tense you're using, are you using the present tense, the past tense, the future tense? It is the word tempo, il tempo presente, il tempo passato, etc., etc. So these are, I said, the few ways to translate the word time with a few examples. So I hope this was useful. Let me remind you that I'm always very happy for you to write comments, ask questions, and I can answer in the comments if it's a short answer, or I'm always happy to upload a video if you need more explanation, especially if it's useful for others as well. And let me remind you that if you want me to cover certain topics, so if you have requests for specific topics, do write in the comments, and I will cover them happily. Also, let me remind you that I do private tuition with Zoom. So one-to-one or otherwise very small groups, maximum 3 students. Right, so I'll leave you with this, and do let me know in the comments how do you find the word time? How do you find it translating the word time into Italian? Do you get confused, and why and when, which context do you make the mistakes or used to make the mistakes and then finally say, oh yes, now I don't do it anymore? So yes, I'm always very interested to know your experience learning the language. Okay, so I will see you on our next session with a different topic, perhaps just a word or a tense or a verb. So I will see you on our next session. Bye bye. Ciao.